Alright, I want to quickly go over another histogram tutorial, but this time focusing largely on StatCrunch and Minitab. I will throw Excel in at the end just for good measure as an addition to the strictly Excel histogram tutorial. But in order to open StatCrunch, I like to go in through the multimedia library, mainly for y'all's sake to see all of the stuff that you can get your hands on. And honestly, to get your hands on the data, because um, besides all of the cool information here from videos and textbook links, this is an easy way to get StatCrunch open. And it starts off with getting at data sets. So if I just pick this example from the beginning of chapter 1, GPS prices for some GPS unit. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this just for good measure here. But let's see what StatCrunch can do for me. So if I wanted some descriptive statistics, I could just go into the summary stats for columns, pick GPS prices, and it's got all these default measures here. And you can see other things that it has that are interesting. But we just compute, and bam, we get the mean value, variance, standard deviation, standard error, which we won't even use until chapter 5 or 6. But we get the range, which is important for finding class width. And then we had some stuff on the quartiles as well. All right, so we have that. We can also get a histogram. And again, we select the thing that we want a histogram for. We leave it as frequency. The bins, where do we start at? Well, if you look right here, your minimum value is 65. And if you quickly do the math, if you take the range here, and let's say you wanted 7 different bins to put things in, you essentially get something a width of 40. But let's just pick a width, regardless of what we're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and throw the mean and median markers on here, even though um, it's not required in this case. And so let's run this. So we have a histogram here, and when you hover over it, it gives you, there are 6 things in that 65 to 105. There are 9 things in the 105 to 145, which you can see down here, these different bin values, which we can now use those when we get to the Excel part, but we'll get to that soon enough. So I've already copied this data, and so if I go over to Minitab, which looks this way once you go into the iLab thing and get your Citrix receiver all dialed in, you can come over here, and if you've copied data from StatCrunch, it will cut and paste without any issues. Sometimes the cut and paste doesn't work so well, and you get some goofy stuff. So here, this data is here. Now, let me show the same thing. There is a summary stats, display descriptive statistics, and you pick, pop those over into the variable column, pick the statistics that you want. We don't need the standard error of the mean. We don't need the non-missing. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, and that pops into here. And so notice you get a mean value of 159.4, 69.8, and if we go back here, 159.4, 69.8, you're getting the same values regardless. Now, histogram is going to be on the graph menu, and it has its own menu item, histogram, simple. Click OK, graph variables. Let's put some labels on here so that it's easy to see what we're looking at, and go there. Now notice here, it has binned them completely different. In fact, it's put them in 8 bins instead of 7 bins. If you wanted to change that, you come over, you double click any bar. It brings up the edit bars. You have a binning option. Number of intervals, 7. And instead of midpoint, you can choose cut point. And so we could go back and say 65, 105, 145, 185, 225, 265, 305. That should give us our 7. Bins extended to encompass all data. And here we go, 6964212. Look at those frequencies. And let's bring up our thing here. So 6, 9, 6, etc. So it's the same thing as before, but Minitab is not as straightforward. If you recall, the ease with which we could build this one, where do the bins start at and what's their width, this is exactly the kind of math that the textbook is selling. Okay, so whereas Minitab, it does it, but it doesn't look as good, and it's a bit clunky at times. Sometimes it's really awesome, but in general, I think StatCrunch is your best, fastest option. Gives you plenty of accuracy, and there's not many things that Minitab beats it at least as far as I can tell. Now let's think about how we would get this data into Excel. So I'll paste this data into Excel, and I'm going to go ahead and whoops, don't want to do that. I want to select this data. I'm going to name it data. All right. And the bins, we want to basically do the same thing as before. So 65, 105. Supposed to remember that pattern. So I have 7 bins there. Let's see what, when I go into data, and there's the data analysis tool pack, which if it's an add-in that you should not have to pay extra for. It's not, but it's not activated by default. We can choose histogram. The input range is data. I forgot to name the bins, so I can't call them by name. And the output range, let's put it right there. And let's have a chart output. And I'll go have a Pareto chart since we didn't do that before. And let's click OK. So interesting output here. We have one. This one is the normal frequency distribution, and this one is the Pareto distribution. All right. Now let's just do one. Let's do a histogram, but let's not do the Pareto chart. And let's put it in a different spot. And so, whoops. There we go. Gotta be careful with the stuff you drag. So here's that histogram. Okay, but notice the way that this thing is binned. Our minimum value is 65, and there's one thing in that bin. And so this has binned differently than what we saw with the StatCrunch version. And the reason for that is, notice here the upper limit of this first bin is 105, whereas here the upper limit of this first bin is 65. And in the other video, the Excel video for histograms, that was strictly Excel, I show how the way that Excel does it is what you put here in the bin is the upper limit, not the lower limit. So we would have to bin things differently in Excel in order to get the same graph that we have here. So my point here is that these are roughly equally good ways to go. However, it is my opinion that for histograms and many things in this course, StatCrunch, not only is it quicker and easier, it's also better looking, and it gets straight to the answer in the way that the book is expecting you to get an answer. So that's my recommendation, to use um, uh, StatCrunch over the other tools, but if you like the other tools and you're good with them, go for it. As long as you can get good answers that are reasonable and you can defend them in the labs, that's really all I care about. So never mind my preference. You need to go with what is going to work best for you. So, cheerio.